Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. New guest today, Gabe Lajeunesse, who's a financial advisor and president of Heart of Vermont BNI. It's a test, and we'll tell you about it later. Also joining me, Gabe, welcome. I should have said that first.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm thrilled you're here. And this has been Kinsley, who's the executive director for Campaign for Vermont, and my co-host.
Thanks, Pat.
And co-producer and co-editor. Good. Anyway, Gabe, first, before we get started about why I asked you here, could you talk a little bit about your background, because you have quite the resume.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I moved back to New England about 4 years ago, and had come back. I was in the Air Force, and my dad had gotten sick. I was in Afghanistan. I got a Red Cross notification 9 months into a year-long assignment out there. And, you know, it was just time to come home when you get that kind of call.
Right.
And so not a lot of military bases in New England anymore. I was a lieutenant colonel. They said, look, we can get you out to Norwich University. Would that work? My family, you know, a nuclear family back over in Portsmouth, New Hampshire area.
Oh.
And so, yeah, that was a great place to land. And, boy, we fell in love with Central Vermont. It's just a great place to raise a family.
That it is.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, you left out a few things that you're going to talk about.
Sure.
So you were an advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You have to talk about those things.
Oh, you want me to tell you
Because we
about
have to talk about that later, because I think it's amazing.
Okay, yes, for sure.
I've never met anybody who was an advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
There's probably not many in Vermont, I don't think.
And you were part of the National Security Council, this is a long title, National Security Council Interagency Policy Committee.
That's right.
Well, we're going to have to chat about that earlier.
Look forward to it.
You have to, and you have a law degree?
I do.
All
Went to
right.
Georgetown Law.
That's great. Good for you.
I can tell you all about that.
All right. Well, we're glad you're here. But the reason I invited Gabe was I'm a friend of Sean Scholice, who's head of Capital Connections, and she is part of a group called Heart of Vermont BNI, which I just found out means Business Network International. And when you're not at a meeting, you're supposed to invite somebody to take your place and talk a little bit about you and then talk about themselves. So Sean asked me to do that last week, and I was fascinated by the group and just the whole format. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about the group and how you got to be involved with them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So Business Networking International, I mean, it's 200,000 members all across the world. And really for me, as I came, you know, we'll get into my background a little bit later, but I came as a small business owner, somebody starting up a business here and trying to develop some connections in a community I didn't have a lot of, you know, natural connection
Sure.
to. I didn't grow up here or that sort of thing. And so in moving up to this area, I made some connections with some, you know, local business people, a realtor and computer, you know, information technology folks. There were a group, about, you know, 6 or 8 of us, and we would meet informally once a month and just talk about business, you know, how things were going, trying to refer business to each other, but we really didn't know how to do that. And I had a friend that was a member of BNI in another town and said, look, you may want to take a look at this. It provides structure for
Right.
how you can help each other grow your businesses.
Right.
And so the executive director of BNI Vermont is Vicki Wasik, and she's up in Chittenden County. She came down, presented to this core group of, you know, 6 or 8 people that we were meeting with, and we listened to it and said, you know, this would really be a powerful way for us to have small business owners and professionals grow the economy, grow their businesses here in Montpelier. And so we started an effort in September of last year to really get that launched, and now we're about 39 members
Right.
from all different kinds of sectors, and meet on a weekly basis to try to help learn about each other's business and help us grow each other's business.
Well, let's just talk about, there were so many things that were happening that was part of the structure, which I thought was amazing. I was asked, as a substitute, you have substitutes
Yeah.
and visitors. And substitutes have to talk 1 minute about the person they're subbing for, right? And then after that's all done, then I could have talked about me, and I love talking about me, so so I talked a minute about me. But things that you do at the meeting.
There's a whole format to
Yeah,
it.
it's amazing.
So I'm a Rotarian like you are, and
Right.
Rotary has a format. If I go to my Northfield Club, I have a sense of what that meeting is going to look like, and BNI does as well. So You know, we come in together, we meet on Fridays at 8 o'clock at Christ Episcopal Church upstairs, and the very beginning is open networking. So we come in at 8 o'clock and we spend about 15 minutes of, you know, just a bit of a mixer. If you've been to a chamber mixer, it's maybe a little bit like that. Of course, you know, we've got a group that's fairly committed and there every week. And, but we also have visitors that are coming in. We're constantly trying to bring in new businesses, new business owners into our group. And so there's opportunities to meet visitors. And then, yeah, there's several different components to it, but the part that I think is most interesting to people is, you know, everybody gets a minute to be able to present about what their business is, what they're trying to do. You know, if we have a florist, they're going to talk about Mother's Day, right? They're going to tell us about what they do and how to, you know, maybe make Mother's Day a special day for your mom through flowers or something like that. So it gives everybody an opportunity to teach us about their business, to help us learn about what they're looking for, so that then we can go out and help them and find people in our circle of acquaintances and clients that could use those services. So the philosophy of BNI is givers gain, and it's really about, you know, as a member, my goal is, I mean, I'd love to grow my business, but it's really to give the other members there opportunities to grow their business.
Right.
With the belief that it will eventually come back to me, and it really does work.
So some people reported on what you have as referrals, and they reported on the dollar amount of, I'm assuming if I brought you business, then you would stand up and say, referred by Pat McDonald, and they were mentioning dollar amounts. I was assuming that was the amount of the contract or the amount of the business.
That's right.
And a couple of them had some staggering, pretty nice numbers for Vermont for a week's worth or work or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, it may not necessarily be a week's worth of work, but that was the business that was closed that week. You know, if you have a business, if you had to have a builder, I mean, they might come in, it's gross, so they have to pay their employees, but maybe they had a $250,000 contract or something. They're going to thank everybody for that. You know, I got $250,000 of closed business from this referral that I got. So yeah, and that's really the element that was missing in our informal group was, how do you track it? How do you create a process? And the organization, BNI, just has a process where you can learn how to be a better referral source. You can learn how to help, you know, the other business owners in your group be able to grow. And so, yeah, I mean, from the launch, I mean, we're about 2 months out, and some of those, the bigger projects, the general contractor things, some of those haven't closed yet. They're still being bid on, but just amongst our group, I saw the numbers from Sean today, and I think we're at about $80,000 in 2 months passed among these 40 business owners. So it's a pretty great launch.
I was very excited about it because then at 1 week, somebody's identified as the best presenter for the minute.
Yes.
And then they get to present the following week for
90 seconds.
90 seconds, and they're supposed to bring a door prize of sorts. And the woman who spoke when I was there was a painting business, and she wrote this amazing book of painting and how different colors blend and stuff. And the gentleman who won it was thrilled to death, and I thought, well, this is great.
Yeah, there's always a fun little door prize. There are best presenters, and the door prize is given. We actually do a 10-minute presentation. We'll rotate around the members to be able to give us more of an education. 60 seconds is nice, but 10 minutes is better, right? So we can really learn a little bit deeper about. And so, yeah, we had, you know, Jenny Dunham from Dunham Brothers, you know, painting, came in and did a presentation. And yeah, we have a fun door prize to remember her and her great business that she does.
Well, it was great. Now, how did you get to be president or executive director? I think it's president?
It's the president,
I like that title anyway.
Yeah,
you should change your title. I like president.
President, yeah.
Just one word.
You know, as we went through the process of forming the group, people volunteered for jobs, people nominated people for jobs. I'm honored. A lot of people put my name down to be the president, and probably because I was one of the founders trying to really, I invited a lot of the people to attend. You know, it took a lot of recruiting to get the group to, you know, 40 members is a lot. There's a lot of people. One of the things you maybe noticed at the beginning, I recognized the rest of the leadership team. I mean, really about 70% of the group is actively involved in the management. I mean, it really is an amazingly
half of the people there were part of
organization.
the management team.
They are.
And it gets them working. That was great.
They are. So everybody's very involved, and yeah, it's a great thing to be, you know, it's the president really is sort of the MC and the orchestrator, but there's so many people just doing so many things all the time to make that run. It's
Yeah,
it's
and
a
at the
team
end, they
effort.
hand out a box with everybody's business card in it, you know, a stack of it.
That's a great
So
idea.
you can go around, and if you've heard something you liked, I took a couple of names to be
Yeah.
on the show,
Yeah.
which is why I asked Gabe to be here, so I took some cards, so anyway.
So do you also not just try to create relationships locally, but also, you know, across the country and across and internationally, since you are an international organization?
Yeah.
Is that part of the goal, is to try to create these networking connections for business opportunities that might even be overseas?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are those opportunities. There's a, you know, nowadays technology makes things so much easier. We've
Yeah.
got a you know, thing called BNI Connect. All the members are in BNI Connect. They can send referrals. You can look up members from all across the country. And the thing is, to come into BNI, first of all, you know, there's a little bit of confidence. So one of the examples that, you know, a realtor. I mean, maybe I'm a realtor and I sell a house here in Montpelier. My clients are moving for a job to, you know, Boston or something. Well, they want a referral. Who's a good realtor? Who can they trust? Well, what you know, you can get in the system and you can find somebody in their town that's a member of BNI, and you can say, look, this is somebody who we know by virtue of being a member of BNI. They're committed to building their business. They're committed to their communities. They're helping other people build their businesses. And you know, there's a vetting process. Everybody's interviewed. You know, you had mentioned this, the interest in there being one member. There's only, if there's a realtor, there's one realtor
Right.
in each group. So they were selected amongst all of their peers to be part of that group. So that does happen, and there are international types of you know, exchanges that way too. So I've heard, for example, like a lot of the Indian businesses, BNI is pretty big in India, you know, they're looking to try to, you know, generate some business with people in the US. They'll find somebody in their target market, reach out and say
That's
they've got an
great.
opportunity.
That's great.
So according to your website, you have workshops available and leadership team training. Can you talk a little bit about the educational programs that you have and who does the training for you?
Yeah, that's great. So it's a franchise. It's owned, you know, BNI Vermont the franchise is owned by Vicki Wasik. She's, you know, the executive director. She's, you know, very well trained, and she has a core of people, most of whom are volunteers from other chapters that will come in and help. So the structure of that, all new members go through what we call Member Success Program, which is sort of the, you know, the boot camp of how you do referral networking, right? How do you market through referrals? How do you have good meetings with, you know, we call it a one-to-one.
Right.
How do you sit down with another business member, you know, member of the group, and learn what it is they're looking for in terms of growing their business? And so you learn how to do that effectively. You learn, you know, anything from how do you work a mixer, or if you're at a trade show. I mean, there's so much that goes on into that education, but you get that little piece, and then there's a mentoring program. So all of our new members are assigned a mentor, and they've got an 8-week program to go through and to have somebody with them, you know, every week, check in, make sure they're doing well, help them understand how to navigate the process of increasing their business through referrals.
That's
Awesome.
great.
That's really cool.
I'm really
And there's
impressed.
advanced training.
So you just mentioned, and I wanted, what's the purpose of having just one financial advisor, one bank representative? What is the reason that there's only one of each category?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of it really is to be able to select the very best, you know, in each category, and people who want to grow, people who are like-minded, you know. So you know, to pick on any profession and say, well, they're the very best. Well, they're the ones who really want to grow their business right now. They're the
Right.
ones who are committed to saying, if my business grows, I want to hire a manager. I want to hire more employees. I am in a growth mode. There are people that are in this community that are great business owners, great business managers, but maybe they're on the downward side, right? They're planning on retiring in a few years. The people who come into BNI self-select, right? They're people who want to see growth, and they come in knowing, and so there's a commitment. And there can be some competition for seats, right? If you have, you know, 2 or 3 people applying, we have a membership committee. They do interviews, they do reference checks,
Wow.
and they're going to nominate who they think of the 2 or 3 applicants for a particular seat should get that spot. So
Yeah, because I thought when people were going around, one woman would say, I'm so-and-so and I fill the media seat, which would be, I thought they were very proud that they were the
Yeah.
representatives of the banking, of finance,
Exactly.
whatever. I thought
Yeah.
that was cool.
And how many seats do you have, and like kind of what kind of sampling of industries do you have?
yeah, that's a great question. So the range of possible seats, I mean, it's quite extensive, you know, in terms of how many different types of businesses there are. but an idea of the kinds of businesses we currently have. We have a fairly good group of tradespeople, so general contractors, kitchen and bath design, electricians, plumbers, heaters.
Security, I thought that guy was pretty
You know,
interesting.
smart home kind
Yeah.
of things that you can do with the security technology.
Right.
So there's a really good group of that. That doesn't mean that we couldn't grow from there. There's still, you know, we have a painter. There's still areas that we don't necessarily have in that space. The financial side, and we've got a commercial lender. You've got, you know, a financial planner. But there's still, we could use an accountant. I mean, there's still room within our group. And for people, you know, in the Montpelier area or surrounding area who might be interested, if you look on our, you know, just Google Heart of Vermont BNI, and you find our site, and you'll see our members. And if the seat isn't taken, you know, we're interested in having you come check us out
That's
and see
great.
if it might work.
That reminded me, where did the Heart of Vermont name come from? Is that, all the other BNIs have that kind of tagline in the front, or?
You
just
can
something
choose
just-
your name, whatever you want your
Yeah.
name to be, and we are, you know, the capital region, and we
Right.
wanted to reflect something that was, you know, that we're central,
Right.
central Vermont. But it actually came from Sarah Gillen, who's a therapist here in town,
Right.
and one of our founding members, and she said, you know, why don't we reflect, we care, you know, our values, that we
Right.
care about people. So Heart of Vermont BNI is a statement not only about the fact that we're in central Vermont, but we have
Yeah.
a group of, you know, very eclectic, caring people,
Yes.
which I think you
said-
saw, right?
Yeah, I did. I said it's a very eclectic, interesting group.
Yeah,
I
and
was
people
very
that really
impressed.
care about each
Yeah,
other.
right.
So, I mean, it just worked, and she nominated it, and everybody voted, and I think it was nearly unanimous that
You
people
just
thought
need
that
coffee,
was a great.
Gabe.
Just need coffee.
Just saying.
That's right.
You're
I
welcome
had
to bring your own
one
copy.
One criticism
One
is no
criticism
coffee.
is the no copy.
So what have you learned from this experience or from the group? Are there any interesting stories that you have or lessons that you've learned by being a part of this organization?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the most powerful thing, so first of all, I've learned a ton. There's so many interesting businesses that I didn't
Right.
even know about or understand. So people do their presentations, and I'm like, oh, I need some of that, or I have a friend that needs that, right? I just think about that. But the power of, you know, referral networking, and I'll use that core trades group as an example. So my dad was a builder, and my dad, I remember this when I was a young guy, he would go, there was one of these little diners that he would go to, and he had to be there every day at 5 o'clock in the morning to meet all the other tradespeople. Because if you were there, you'd hear about what the different projects were that were going on. And that's how he would get his jobs. He would hear about this, that, or the other thing. When that diner closed down, it was devastating to him. He had no place to go. Where was he going to go and find out about these referrals? So he would actually drive around. I remember him telling me about this. He would drive around and he would look for a new foundation. If he saw an excavator going in, knocking down some trees or starting a foundation pour, he would leave his business cards. And it's like, boy, how do we create a system where people can actually, that the tradespeople do know. They know about different projects that are going on. And so in this group, that's one of the most exciting things. And if you watch our numbers, you're going to see them really, you know, rocket through the building season in the summertime, because all of those, you know, allied tradespeople, they can all refer business. So the painter knows about the, you know, the expansion
Right.
project, who knows about the new cabinets that are needed, who, you know, they all are able to support one another and be able to develop those relationships of trust. And you really do. You learn to trust these people, and everything here is word of mouth anyway.
Right.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean-
Yeah,
especially in Vermont.
Yeah,
Everything in
exactly.
Vermont, right? So
Yeah.
where are you going to get something done if you can say, oh, I've done 10 projects with these guys. These guys are great. They're immediately, oh, well, you've done a great job for me. You're telling me these guys have done a great job for you. Let's go do some business with them. So it really is working.
And
It's
I
pretty
didn't even
powerful.
know, when I first got there, people were working the room.
Yes.
And they were coming up, handing me the card, and I'm so-and-so, and so I had my card, and they really are not shy group, which is a
No,
good thing.
yeah.
And how do people join? Is there, you said there's an onboarding process, like a training that they have to go through. So do they go to you? Do they go to the Vermont chapter? How does that work?
Yeah, so somebody that would be interested, what they should do is they should come out to our group and check
Yeah,
it out,
you
because
just-
it's actually a pretty serious commitment. We're there every single week. It's a 90-minute meeting, and we're committed to being there every week. So things come up, people go on vacation. You can have a substitute like
Right.
Sean had for you. But it's a significant commitment in that regard. But then most of the real business is done not in that meeting. It's done in one-to-one meetings that take place with other, you know, business people. And so, you know, we're asking all our members to do, you know, 1.5 one-to-ones on average per week. You know, go out and meet with another member of the group. So this is a big time commitment. You're really working on growing your business instead of just working in your business. So people should come and see. They should come and look and see the energy and see what's going on and see if that's something that might interest them. If we already have that particular member in our group, if you're a painter, we already have a painter, but you could still come and look, and maybe that would give you some insight as to whether it's worth your time, you know, forming a new group some other town, or, you know, joining another group that might not have a painter in it. So definitely come and see is what I would say. And then we give you, if you come, well, you know, and you see what it is, we'll give you all the information you need to decide if you're going to apply. And then yes, then the membership committee takes the application, does the interviews, the reference checks, and you know, invites you in if it looks like a good fit.
So one of the members mentioned that they had met with you. She was doing the list of one-on-one. Then she would come to you for financial advice or help with her business about how to invest? I mean, what would be the connection between a member and your background?
Yeah, so I mean, the one-to-ones, it's not to say that we don't ever, you know, refer our own business needs to other people. We certainly do, but the purpose is not that I'm the financial advisor of all those people in that room, right? In fact, that's not I work with retirees and pre-retirees. Most of those people are much younger than that. So that's not my target group. What we do is we meet together, and most of my one-on-ones right now are focused on educating, and I want to hear from them too, but exactly what my target you know, profile of a client is, what their general concerns are, what things they can listen for, and maybe some ways that they can invite them to meet me. And for me, I do a lot of seminars, and so usually that's what it is this is sort of the profile. This is what their concerns usually are, and if you know those people, and it's an easy invitation, I'm doing a dinner at Capitol Plaza on this night, you know, bring them along. So that's for me, and then I want to hear the same thing from them. You know, what is it that you need? What are you looking for? What kind of projects? And how do I know? Right? And so it's really a conversation about what you need as a business owner, so I can learn that, so I can look at my contacts here and figure out how to refer it.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah, and you know, certainly I have clients in that group, but that's not the purpose. The purpose isn't that we're all doing business with each other.
Right. That's right.
We're helping each other.
You mentioned you have an event. Do you want to give yourself a plug?
Oh, I plug? Well, yeah, I have a couple events. So, you know, one event that I have coming up is, you know, every quarter or so I do a Trust and Estates event. So I've got one on the 10th. I think it's subscribed, but just so that people know, I'm doing a lunch at the Capitol Plaza. I'm doing that with Claudia Pringles, who's also in BNI. She's a Trust and Estates attorney. And I just have a lot of clients. The number one need for people is usually that retirement goal. How do I get to retirement? Right. But then right after that, they're trying to figure out, once they realize they're not going to be able to spend all their money, how do they take care of their grandkids or their charities or whatever that they care about? So I do one of those about once a quarter, and I have one this week at the Capitol Plaza. And then on the 23rd of May in Northfield at this really cool spot called the Woods Lodge. It used to be a you know, summer camp or something like that, but they've just turned it into this beautiful space. It's up a dirt road. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous spot. I'm doing a market update. I've got Franklin Templeton funds coming in. We're just going to be talking about what's going on in the economy.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, and we want to talk about that too. We can switch on. Is there anything else you'd like to say about BNI before? Because I'd like to find out more about your background. Anything else that we missed?
No, I just think, look, if you're a business owner and you're in the central Vermont area and you'd like to be able to grow your business, you're in that place where you're committed to doing that, come check us out. We're 8 o'clock every Friday morning, Christ Episcopal Church here on State Street in Montpelier. We'd love to have you.
I do have one quick question.
Oh, yes, sure.
So how many chapters of BNI are there in Vermont?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd have to look at the website to be sure. I think we're maybe at 12 or 15, something like that.
So almost one per county.
Yeah, but most of them are Chittenden County based. If you went and looked at where they're at, most of them, you know, what tends to happen is they're successful, and then other people like know that they need this to help grow their business, and they'll start one, you know, down the road. I mean, there's a big population up there. So in central Vermont, we have this one in Montpelier. There's one that meets at the in Berlin at the Chamber of Commerce. That's called Crossroads BNI. And there's, you know, Waterbury and, you know, Morristown. There's been some talk about some others that might be out in this way.
Who does your marketing and advertising to get the word out? Because I'm embarrassed to say I've never heard of BNI. So it was a whole new experience for me. How do you get the word out to folks who might be interested?
Yeah, it's mostly word of mouth. It's like everything else that we do, being referral marketing, type thing. We're inviting all of the business owners that we know. There are, we work the trade shows, so people that are working the trade shows would see us there.
Yeah.
But in terms of broader marketing, yeah, there's not, it's mostly a word of mouth kind of process.
Well, I hope this helps.
Yeah, thank you.
I really had a great time. I really did. It was very
40 business owners, an opportunity to get up and tell us about what you're doing is a great.
Well, and what was cool is everybody used the minute differently.
Yes.
It wasn't like a canned speech or anything. Everybody found something interesting to say, like you said, about Mother's Day.
Right.
It was pretty cool.
It was very good.
But unfortunately, I was last, so that was good.
Yeah, you get to watch everyone else.
Exactly.
Yeah,
what do I do? If I was
survey.
first, I would have had a bad time, but I was last. So I wanted to skip to your background because, seriously, you spent 20 years in the Air Force, 1994 to 2004, and through that, you became an advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Was it through your military experience?
Yeah.
So could you talk about what you did and, I mean,
Yeah.
how exciting is that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting, and maybe I'll just, sort of start from about the middle of my career. I mean, I had spent most of my time in a, outfit that worked on counterintelligence stuff, which is really exciting. It's, terrorism and espionage and really protecting the United States. And, it was really rewarding. They had sent me, in my early years for a master's in Middle Eastern studies and a language, and so I'd spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And in 2004, I was in Iraq, and the unit that I commanded, we would basically figure out through sources that we would run the location of whether it's Al-Qaeda cells or some of the Shia extremists that were in the area, and then work with special operations to then be able to take those networks down. And when I got there, there was still. People look at the Iraq situation now and can say all kinds of things about it. But at that moment in time, there were some true patriots that were working with us. I mean, these were people who had been exiled, who had been, whose families had been tortured, who had been, been through horrific things under Saddam, and they were the folks that helped us be in that spot to be able to, help them achieve their vision and their goals. But in 2004, about midway through my assignment there. We had a scandal at Abu Ghraib, and for folks who may not remember, Abu Ghraib was, really a black mark on who we were as American people. There were detainees that were, mistreated, certainly, maybe tortured, but certainly humiliated, and it put a black mark on us. And what happened at that moment was all of the patriots, all of the people that really were in it for the right reason, they all stopped cooperating with us.
Oh,
they,
interesting.
at least in my area, what I would say is, how can we seem like we're any different than the regime if we're doing the same things as the regime? Right. And I remember, I remember being on a call to my wife, one of the few calls I could make, and I said, there's something wrong with our country when we get to this point, right, that these are the kinds of things that we're engaged in, where we can't even, how can we win hearts and minds if we're involved in this sort of stuff?
Right.
And so I made a choice at that point that I needed to really be involved in policy, that I really needed to be in a position to be able to influence decision makers so that we wouldn't ever get to a place like that. Again, that was my hope and desire. So after that, I ended up following a path that put me in DC. I went back to school, went to Georgetown Law, got a little bit more of an education, and worked in a number of policy jobs. And with my background, I ended up, it was certainly a hand-picked kind of assignment, but I ended up in the Joint Staff on the Iraq desk, where the National Security Council, which is a question you asked about, the structure of that is, you've got the president and his key advisors. Well, one of those key advisors is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So the chairman has to go to these meetings every day, 3 times a week, whatever they are, and he has to be able to talk about events from all over the world. Well, how does he know what the issues are, or what our plans are, what the options are that he can present the president? Well, that was our job. So I worked on, my initial posting was in Iraq reconstruction. So Iraq was this was 2006, I think, is when I first started there. If you think about what was going on in Iraq, it was pretty bad. The surge hadn't started yet. That was part of the work that we did there. And the challenge was all of these unemployed Sunni Iraqis that had,
Right.
through debathification and that sort of thing had been put off. And so I worked on, how do we get them back to work? How do we get some economic stimulus into the various provinces? And so I worked on that, for, my first part of the time there. And the way that would work, the interagency policy councils are sort of the working groups that sit underneath the NSC to get everything ready for, the president, to get everything ready for that National Security Council. So the National Security Council is the one everybody knows about. Then you have the Deputies Committee, which is, the vice president, deputy cabinet members. And then we were the group we were the working group. We were the ones who actually did it.
People who did the work, right?
We were the ones, we'd be the ones that would put that all together. Right. So I did that, and then I ended up on so that was a big team because Iraq was, a big issue. And then I ended up in a very small group. It was just me and one other guy that worked on Iran policy. And that was, you'd asked about, Obama and the Bush transition.
Yeah, because you were Bush and Obama, correct? In that
yeah. And so I worked on the Iran team during that transition. And it was interesting because President Obama came in and did a complete review of our Iran policy. And, we would meet, all that working group, we would meet together 2 or 3 times a week in the Situation Room to run through what all the various options were. Mostly it was carrots and sticks. We were trying to figure out how you get Iran to the table so that they would negotiate over this nuclear program that they had. And the president really, the new president, not knowing, wanted every rock,
Sure.
turned over to see every option that might be available. And so it was really interesting to work through, the Bush administration and then into a new administration and to be part of it. So that's where I caught the policy bug. I mean, those kinds of issues, bringing together an interagency sort of body, lots of experts, coordinating that information to come up with the best solutions. I mean, and I still am very passionate about that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you probably have to kill us if you tell us, but when you're doing policy, did you really feel that they were listening and you had an impact on what the nation was doing in those areas?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, there's parts of presidential speeches when you see
Is
that
it
that's, I
your
mean, maybe it's
words?
only a sentence, but,
Yeah.
but you
got your
wrote
sentence
it.
in there.
You wrote it. You're
Yeah.
like, well, among the 20 people that coordinated on the speech, I still got that
Wow.
sentence in there. It's
Yep.
pretty
That's
cool.
exciting.
It's probably like you with some of the legislative work.
It
right?
is.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You see something get in there. It's like, wow. You had something to
Right.
do with
My
that.
words.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
So how did you go from there? Then you went to Norwich. Was that the?
Well, it really was, I ended up in Afghanistan doing, more of the same kind of work at the headquarters
Right.
there. And then, it really was just, what do you do when you have a widow mom, right? I mean, it really changes your whole life perspective. It was just get back home as quickly as you can, figure out, how you're going to
Right.
reset yourself. And the transition, it's interesting. So I'm an attorney, I'm a military officer, you got Norwich, but, there's more attorneys in Montpelier than anywhere
Yes,
outside
per
of
capita,
DC.
we are the
Right?
highest
Yes.
per capita, right?
It's unbelievable,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, okay, what is a guy with my back? I really don't want to be in divorce court and doing public defender work. That isn't me. And a friend of mine, a good friend, was with Edward Jones and said, hey, look, you have background as an attorney in
Right.
trust and estates and taxation. We've got this great firm. We can add all of these, the financial tools to your background and really give you a strong,
That's great.
strong experience. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm really thankful that he, invited me to join Edward Jones, and it's been a great ride.
That's great.
Yeah.
So when did you start with them?
Yeah, so I'm 2.5 years in
Okay.
with Edward Jones, and I'm partnered here with Mark Perry in Montpelier, who's the longest serving financial advisor in Montpelier, and he's going through a retirement transition, and so I'm helping him through that. Still growing my own business, taking on in my own clients as well.
That's great.
And do you feel like your previous experience has really helped you in your current role, both at Edward Jones and now with BNI? Because you clearly have a lot of international experience and policy work.
Yeah, I think, the thing about the international side of it, I think, is very helpful because, and a lot of the policy stuff that I worked, like I described, it was economic. So trying to understand how international markets are impacting the domestic market, I mean, I think that's certainly a strength. I think the legal background, I mean, I issue spot all the time and see things that people really need. And I'm not going to do I'm going to refer out to an attorney or to the accountant that needs to do the additional work there. But I can see those things, and so all of that really helps. But the number one thing is just being able to interact with people. I mean, you know, I don't know. It's when you're out in front of the kind of people that you've been, you know, involved with all those years, to come and to really sit down, there's not a whole lot that scares you, right? I mean, you look at a challenge, you're like, look, nobody's shooting at me today, right? This is,
I was going to say, with what you've been through, this is pretty good.
I mean, I know this is a couple $1 million portfolio, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get through it, right?
That's
I mean,
great.
we can work through it.
Well,
so.
I read when I was doing some research that in March 2017, Edward Jones was named the best workplace in financial services and named one of the top 50 companies that care.
Yeah.
I thought, wow.
It is a great
you've
company.
landed in a good place.
Yeah, and in Vermont, we've been, you know, in that running for the top, and we've been the top, you know,
Yep.
several times, 4 or 5 times in the last decade. So.
Yeah, I follow those statistics, like what the best places to work
Yeah.
in the state, and Edward Jones is oftentimes
Yeah.
right up there.
It is a great firm.
So you know, I don't know how involved you are in politics, but here in Vermont, our big thing is the economy and jobs. And you've mentioned economic analysis a couple of times. What's your view of Vermont and the economic situation we're in, either here or globally?
Yeah,
or?
no, I appreciate that. You know, and I'm not a financial analyst. I'm a financial advisor, but I do talk to our analysts all the time. And it's interesting to get a sense and flavor for where things are at. You know, most of my clients are pretty happy. They come in for reviews, and they've had a pretty good, you know, 1.5 or 2 years in the stock market. But what's really driving that? You know, a lot of it is hope and some economic policies that the president might be able to get through. You know, things like, you know, infrastructure. I mean, we have, you know, $4 trillion of infrastructure work to do in this country to get us back to just the safety standard. I mean, that, you know, that kind of spending, and not that we're going to do all of that all at once, but certainly some infrastructure spending would help. We've got companies.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to, but you said
$4
that's
trillion.
what we have to spend to get us back into safety?
Yeah.
What, you
So-
mean from the condition of
From the condition that
infrastructure?
we're in, yeah, our infrastructure is, you know, rated a D-, right? To get our nation,
Whoa.
you know, roads, bridges, and things,
Rail.
it's estimated about, $4 trillion would need to be invested. So anyway,
Not ever heard that. That's pretty staggering.
yeah, it's a pretty huge number. Now,
Yeah.
I think the president has suggested $1 trillion, but in any case, that's one of the things people have been optimistic about. You know, things like reform of taxes and repatriating a lot of money. We've got companies with hundreds of billions of dollars in offshore tax havens because they don't want to pay, you know, the CEO of Apple has said, you know, I'd love to bring this $260 billion back, but I'm not going to pay 40% taxes to do it, right?
Right.
So if you can bring some of that money back. But anyway, a lot of that is sort of baked into what you see in the stock market right now. And so people, you know, people have concerns about, well, is it too high? You know, really at the end of the day, I think as we look at, you know, what's happening forward, bull markets don't die of old age, right? We're in the second longest bull market in history, but you know, usually you have a boom bust cycle. You know, and I've been telling this story a little bit lately. I remember in 2004, we were buying a house, and we were in a bidding war for this house. And I remember telling my wife, this was 2004, way before the height, way before the peak, but I remember telling my wife, this is absolutely unsustainable. I know what the average income is in this area. I know what the houses are going for. There's no way people can afford to pay these prices for these homes. And so, but still, I still bought at a high point. Other people bought at much higher points down the road. And that's what happens in that boom bust cycle. There's nothing really like that right now. And so could there be a correction? We do believe volatility can return. You know, we normally in 1 year, we have a 10 to 12% correction in 1 year. And, you know, if you look at last year as an example, we had the worst January start, you know, in history. You know, we had a big decline after the British vote to exit the European Union.
Right?
Yeah, and so, but then we ended up the market 9%. So there can certainly be a lot of volatility. And so we are advising people to, you know, maybe overweight some cash positions. Normally in an investment portfolio, we might have 2% in cash.
Oh, in cash, right.
But maybe you want to have 3 or 4% just to take advantage of the opportunity. We would expect that there would be some volatility before, you know, we have some further ups. But who knows, you know?
Okay, so
there's no crystal ball.
So how about the housing market in general? Is it up, down? Because you said you bought high, but has it peaked and gone down, and it's a seller's market, buyer's market?
No, that's a great question, and I think the data is a little bit mixed. You know, if you looked at the quarterly data, I think we've had You know, some good indications that, you know, we've had a renting population for a little bit. There's been some discussion about that. And I think with new housing starts, there's some indication that people are starting to buy. We have more people starting to buy and more new home starts. So, I mean, I think that's certainly a good indication. Overall, we look at it and say, look, the economy is probably going to grow at a much slower pace than it has in the past. 2%, you know, is really probably a realistic number. People are, you know, used to seeing, you know, the stock market has averaged 9% return. Our view is project more like 6%. It's probably going to be higher, but let's project on the safe side. Just things are growing much slower than that.
Hasn't the stock market really gone up considerably, with a lot of people believing that the president will do wondrous things with regard to taxes or regulations, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was some of what I was,
yeah,
what I was referring to, and some of the hope that's there. So there are certainly, that's kind of, you know, baked in. There are some good things in the corporate revenue realm. I mean, the first quarter of this year, as compared to the first quarter last year, was up 9% in corporate earnings. So that's pretty good. You know, how far that can go, you don't know. Gross domestic product is really a factor of two things. It's a factor of your working population, you know, and it's a factor of efficiency. And so there could be some revolutions in technology, some of the automation types things that will go on that could improve efficiency to some degree. But our working population, we just have an aging population. We have a lot of people retiring. You know, we look at immigration as probably not going to produce a lot of, you know, new workers in the near term anyway. And so overall, to expect, you know, huge changes in the gross domestic product, I think, are unrealistic.
Do you get involved in Vermont-specific issues here? Helping somebody, well, you said you're mostly retiring, but helping somebody start a business, maybe through BNI, is just where we are. Is this a good place to start a business?
Well, and some of our demographic issues, I think, are more severe than in other parts of the country. For example, you talked about aging workforce. You know, Vermont's workforce is aging at a rate that's pretty alarming. And also,
are we the third oldest state?
Second.
Second. Oh,
second
better.
Oldest,
We've gotten
and we're catching up.
Oh, good for us.
Maine is number one.
Excellent.
And we're catching up to them.
Okay.
So, and then we also have a housing stock that's relatively old and is also really more of a. We don't have enough housing stock to meet demand at the moment in the state, and particularly on the affordable end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think so, you know, just to maybe step away from my role as an Edward Jones advisor, because those things are all, what I was talking about there really comes from a lot of really smart people at our home office. But, you know, as a citizen of Vermont, you know, not as a financial advisor, I mean, these demographic trends, I think, are things that concern all of us, right? I mean, I'm very interested in, you know, what it is that we can do for my children to grow, you know, the base, the tax base. We need to recruit people in to live here. To be able to start businesses here. We are an incredibly entrepreneurial state. I mean, we lead or are among the leaders in the whole country in terms of startups. We have lots of startups.
Yep, lots of startups.
You know, but in terms of helping people sort of achieve the vision they want, you know, and the kinds of things that can create jobs. I mean, there's a lot of you know, and the food sector is a great sector, right? But there's a lot of startups that will be, well, here's my granola. Or, you know, microbrews are important to Vermont, so I mean that is important. But a lot of them, a lot of the startups are along those lines. They're not necessarily going to employ, you know, lots
hundreds
of people.
Right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's really important that we think. And these are the policy things that interest me, right? Is how do you work to increase your tax base? How do you work to attract more people to Vermont? You know, how do you draw more entrepreneurs? How do you help those small business people grow?
And every once in a while, you'll hit Green Mountain Coffee or a Ben & Jerry's or a Burton or a My Web Grocer or a Dealer.com. But trying to figure out which one of those businesses is going to be the one that succeeds when they're early on is a really difficult thing to do. So you really have to, as a business community and as a state, support all those startups, and the ones that are going to float to the top will float to the top and succeed. Yeah,
and I think there's some great models out there for how you grow a business. I mean, you know, Texas had an Open for Business campaign for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
and they took businesses away from New York and a lot of other places.
You know, they really attracted folks in. I think one of the things that'll be interesting to see how, you know, what the actual, you know, taxation scheme comes for imports and exports. But we do have, you know, we have a free trade zone. I don't know that it's used very much, but up in Burlington, I mean, could you attract some foreign companies if taxes went up for them, if, you know, duties went up? Could you attract some companies to come into the Burlington airport, you know, because of the free trade zone status? So if you know about that, they can bring in raw materials, and as long as they turn it into a useful product here in the U.S., they don't get charged the levy that they would get for just the pure raw materials. So I think there's some opportunities to really attract people. We have such a high quality of life here. You know, so we need to be creative, and those are the kinds of things. I'm really glad I've read some of the papers that you guys are very creative, and some of the Campaign for Vermont
we try
papers.
to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important
Think
that we
outside
all,
the box.
and we, you know, there's the thing is the things that we agree on are so much, you know, more powerful than things we disagree on. But that's where everybody wants to go. They want to go in their corners. And we all want the same. We all want our kids to, you know, to thrive. We want them to be able to stay here if they want to stay here. We want them to be able to feel that there's success. And so you have some models I think you could look at, and you could be more creative. You can have some real innovative ideas on how you deal with things like education, and, you know, to really improve the quality of life.
Yeah, we did a show 2 weeks ago with you. Actually, Ben was the guest, talking about Campaign for Vermont's idea about bringing in foreign students, which I thought was amazing, and you got a lot of really positive response.
Turning this, you know, Vermont's lost 20,000 students since 1998, and you know, our administrative structure hasn't changed a whole lot in response to that. So really, we have a lot of excess capacity in our schools for more students. And of course, the traditional ways of increasing our student population take a significant amount of time. And because Vermont's property tax system is based on a cost per student model, there are rural parts of the state that have lost significant numbers of students and have seen their tax rates go through the roof because of it. So trying to find a new creative way to get students into the classroom to fill that capacity, bring in new revenue, and then stabilize tax rates.
Yeah, I saw you guys had a little, was it a YouTube video you did? You had a really nice presentation. I watched that, and I was very impressed. I mean, it's a very...
Because you can do that with any other ideas. They're looking now at the $26 million to be saved through the teachers' health care, but that can be done in tandem with what you're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, it can work with the current Act 46 consolidation efforts. It's independent of that.
I hope it gets traction.
Well, we got to start thinking outside the box, because
I think it's great for our students to be exposed to other cultures, other people, and right in the classroom.
Well, it was a really innovative idea, and I think, you know, the more, that's the kind of thinking you need. How do you attract? And I think some of it is maybe not just student recruiting, business recruiting. You know, how do you get, you know, people to come in here on visas for investors, you know, so that they can come in and want to put money in here? How do you facilitate that? And again, I think there are some examples that we can look at from other states that have done this well, where we can adopt some of that. And again, some of these outside the box ideas are really good. One of the things that was interesting to me, you know, and maybe I can turn the table back on you as the interviewer, but we just went through in, you know, in Northfield, in Williamstown, we went through this whole merger process, right? So there was, I don't know if there was a ton of debate. We had really wonderful people on our committee, and I'm sure on the Williamstown side. But one of the things that was apparent to me is the key issue for Vermonters is really about the importance of those schools. These schools are so important.
Really important.
To the community. It's one of the few unifying things in many of these really rural communities. How do you bring people together? And so a lot of the, you know, the ideas behind consolidation in terms of cost savings, I mean, it's probably unrealistic, right? Because maybe you're going to shave off a couple of positions, but people really want to maintain that school and their community. So what you really need to do is things like what you're describing. How do you make that viable, right? How do you make that viable? And for me, you know, one of the concerns is, well, we do such an exceptional job at taking care of, you know, special needs kids. I have a child that was, you know, had an IEP and went through that. And we do an incredible job, I would say, as good or better than anybody else in the world, you know, how we take care of those kids. But what about on the other end of the spectrum? I also have some gifted kids. What about those guys? And I think there's some innovation that can happen there to leverage technology to keep them in their school, but still have them have access to the kinds of programming that would be difficult if there's 3 or 4 kids trying to take an AP class. And some of it's already happening, but some of it could be
because
more
for those
formalized.
kids who are on the higher end of the spectrum, unless their families have a lot of money to send them to a private school, they're in the system and just not being challenged.
Yeah, and I think that's
what
where
I
some
hear from
innovation can
friends.
come in. So maybe you have some
Yeah.
ideas on that.
Yeah.
Not to
Well,
put you on the
I
spot,
think
but-
certainly technology has progressed to the point where some of those things are viable, like distance learning. You can have language classes, for example, that are taught via video conferencing, and you can do some of that. You can do things like cooperative classes where a couple high schools in a region get together and do classes where they share a teacher, and then things like even our technical education centers, which was kind of the innovation 20 years ago that are kind of starting to see this resurgence as there's this growth in demand for trade skills, like things like welding and
But there was
plumbing.
such a resistance. I was the deputy commissioner of education for a while. And we talked about this. I don't know what the resistance is. You could do languages that way. Not every
Right.
school can offer languages because they can't afford the teacher. You could have one teacher, through the internet, teaching whatever, French, German, whatever.
And I think
don't
that,
understand the reluctance.
I think people, it's a different generation. I think we've seen how that, some of that. I'd be really interested if you guys took that on to think about, some of those challenges. I mean, I just think back to, we lived down in the DC area. I had a friend that, she went to Johns Hopkins Medical School. She had a child while she was in medical school. What did she do? She could still attend all her classes. They recorded all her classes.
Yeah.
And she's a medical doctor,
We're
right?
resistant, and I don't get it.
I
don't
also think
understand
that
it.
this newest generation is a lot more, for the
Savvy.
kids, they're used to technology. They're more
Right.
comfortable with technology. They know how to interface with technology better than
That's a good
potentially.
point. Maybe this is the time.
So it might be the time, and there needs to be. There's a lot of research around how it works for some students and how it doesn't work.
Right.
So every child learns differently. So sometimes that's a good learning environment. Sometimes you need the in-person, depending on the student. So finding solutions that work, for everyone and provide quality education.
Well, I'm always fighting
key.
about, everybody says our kids have to stay, and my take is no, they don't. What you're as a parent, you're wanting them to go off and learn how to be independent by themselves. I think we should go look at the non-military kids in Norwich, go to UVM. They've picked Vermont for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They like it here. They of all the colleges they have a choice of, they've said Norwich or UVM or Champlain, and we should find out what they're interested in and attract them to stay.
No, I mean, I
Our
agree.
kids will come back after when they want to raise their kids
That's
in a
right.
safe environment.
I mean, I'm a
They'll come
Vermonter by
back.
choice. I grew up
Yep.
in New Hampshire. This is every time I drive out to visit my family. Portsmouth is a pretty town in the summer, but
Yes,
every
yes.
other month of the year,
Yeah.
I'm like, they should all come visit me because it's way nicer, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's just way
exactly.
nicer, and I think we need to be mindful of Vermonters by choice as well as those who have been here for generations. But I think you look at some of then there's some really interesting stuff going on up in Burlington. I think that they've got the generator up there, which is a
That's
maker
right.
space,
Yeah.
which is
Right.
really cool. But to the extent that you could have private-public partnerships and something like an incubator, you look at some of the technology that's come out of Silicon Valley. I mean, that is,
Right.
they brought that to life, right? They had competitions. Who's going to get our funding? We're going to incubate you. We're going to bring in the best minds to help you be successful. And
Yeah.
these are $100 million companies that have spun out of this kind of thing. So
Well, what's great Burlington is a growing tech hub. It hasn't quite hit the peak where cities like Seattle or Dallas even have kind of crested and have really attracted some very large businesses. But IBM, which is now Global Foundries, kind of which was happenstance that it even was put there, acted as an anchor before there was even a hub there to attach to,
Right.
and became the focal point.
mhm.
And there's all these businesses that have spun off from the innovation happening there. And I think ways to capture it and take an idea and put it in place and make it work. There's partnerships, like you said, like Generator that's happening, that's connecting some of these tinkerers, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term, with venture capitalists
Mhm.
that can say, hey, that's a great product. Let's invest in that.
That's great. I don't think we've done, we say that entrepreneurship is a niche for Vermont, but listening to you, I think it should be taken another step to really excite and encourage the entrepreneurs to do bigger, better I'm not sure we're doing such
Exactly.
a good job on that. Gabe, I just looked at the clock and we're running out of time. Is there anything, we covered a lot. We sort of went off and
We talked
we did
about
a financial
Yeah.
show
We
instead
talked
of
a lot about a
but
lot of things.
You were here for BNI,
Thank
and I
you.
want to encourage you all to check out BNI. I was really impressed, and I think you should. We really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you very much. Sure
So,
appreciate that.
yeah,
And please come out and visit us.
Yeah, I
8
think
o'clock every Friday.
So do they need to call in advance or just show up?
They can get on our site and they can pre-register,
Oh,
but if
okay.
they don't want to find that, they can just come out. We're happy
Good.
to have them.
Go do it. It's really worth an hour and a half of your time on a Friday morning. In the meantime, thanks for watching. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites. And we'll see you next week. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I looked up. I went, yay.